Hello, my name is Bill. Today I want to do a video about glass lathe straightness, meaning if you want to check your lathe on how straight it is, perhaps you could do this. I do not normally use steel points. I use the glass itself because the glass itself is readily available, and that's what we're doing anyway, is we're doing glass work. So as I said, my name is Bill. This is being photographed by my friend Jay, who is my producer, editor, executive person, but we don't have enough money in the budget for him to say anything, so don't say anything, Jay. Thank you. Anyway, first thing we're going to do is talk about the lathe itself. Me personally, I've only ever had experience on Litton lathes. This is a Litton EE. It has a 3 3/4 inch bore, so you can get about 90 millimeter through it, which is pretty good size, and you can still sit down at the machine. But what I want to talk about is first the lathe. It's important that your lathe is level and square. Litton helps that a little bit by these feet are fixed, these feet are somewhat on a pivot, so it's a 3-point stand. You don't necessarily have to level Littons out completely, but it's a good idea. And what I mean by leveling is not a torpedo level. A torpedo level is, to me, my opinion, is a carpentry instrument that will show you kind of where you are, but there are such things as real machinery levels, precision levels. And if you need to call somebody in, especially if you have a very large machine, to level it, that's what you should do, is use a precision level or somebody that knows how to level it. Lubrication and adjustment. Your lathe should always be lubricated. I like, especially on the bed, I use real whey oil. This is a product that I get out of McMaster Car. Very readily available. It's a nice sticky oil. It stays there a lot. It also drips on your machine, but you know, more sometimes is good. Make sure you're clean, lubricated. On a Litton, and you can talk to Tim O'Brien at Litton about this. Tim's a real great guy. You want to be sure that your spindle bearings are adjusted. This is a spindle nut wrench by Litton. And it's a simple process. This one I think needs to, you have to open up one Allen screw. This fits into these pins, and you can actually turn the nut to adjust the bearings. If your bearings are loose, they're not sitting right, the center line of that spindle will not be the center line of this spindle, which is what we're looking for. We want to be sure that these center lines are the same. So get to know your machine. A glass lathe is a glass lathe. A glass lathe is not a machine lathe. A machine lathe is not a glass lathe. They're precision to a point. They're not, as I said, they're not machine lathes or metalworking lathes. But I think we'll ask Jay to move around. Well, the other thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to go space normal speed. I'm not going to go fast through anything. We're not going to do slow motion. We're not going to do fast motion. We're going to do sort of whatever happens, happens. If this all kind of starts to go to hell, I'm going to try to fix it, and you're going to see that. I hope we don't do that. So one of the things we need to do, at least to me, we need to pray to the glass god. Now the glass god to me is nothing more than a deity that you need to pay a little respect to. And all you have to do is hold your tubing or your work up in the morning or in the afternoon, whenever you start, and you say, please glass god, don't let me F up today. Because if you don't do that, the glass god will do one of three things to you, or a combination of all three things. He'll either cut you, burn you, or turn your work to crap. And like I said, or a combination of all three. Pretty much, it's just be aware of what you're doing and be safe. That's really all it is. But another thing about the lathe, the drive. Be sure that your drive, again, I've only worked on Littons, I only know about those. The drive shaft is clean, the stub shafts are snug, your chains are tight. If Jay can focus in a little bit on this, let's see how mine is. This has got a little play in it. That seems to be the chain. That for me is normal. That's not that bad. Let's see what the headstock does. Headstock's a little tighter. It's moving the drive shaft right away. Now, is the headstock moving the tailstock? Seems to have a little play in the stub shaft, but that's also acceptable. Again, glass lathe is not a machine lathe. Get to know your machine, get to know what you can do, what you can't do. So, what we're gonna do, as I said, we wanna know that this center line and this center line are the same. These particular chucks, scroll chucks, I'm going to make them crooked on purpose. You can take out the jaws, the master jaws out of these. I'm actually gonna switch, they're numbered. I don't know if we can focus in on that. Is that number, what number is that? I don't have my glasses. I'm going to have to put on my glasses. Because we can't have Jay talk. We don't have enough money in the budget. Oh, that looks like number 3. That's fine. So the area is marked, the master jaw is marked, and the top jaw is marked. It should always be 3, 3, and 3. We're going to remove 3 and 2, and we're going to switch them so that the chuck is crooked on purpose. I'm doing the chuck crooked on purpose because I want to demonstrate that it's not the chuck that's important. You can always chuck up something crooked and yet have straight work. So number 3 should come out first. Carefully, carefully. I've had these drop onto the floor too, so we got to be a little careful. 3 should come out first. Come on. There it is. There's number 3. Number 2 should come out next. There's number 2. We're not going to take out number 1. But we're going to take number 3 and we're going to put it in number 2 spot. It says here in fine print. Bring the scroll up to the lead. There's the lead. Put in number 2 and number 3. Now, I guarantee you, whoops, we missed it. See, demonstration principle. We're going to have to try that again. There. So we're going to take, like I said, we're going to take number 2. Oh, I got to put my glasses back on. Well, that's number 3. So we're going to take number 2 and put it in number 3 spot. I'm wrong about that. We need, let's see, this one is going to hit first. Number 2 should actually hit first. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just take them all out. Here's number 1. Let's start with number 1. So there's number 1, number 1, number 1. There's the beginning of the scroll. That one's in. Bring the scroll around. And it should be number 2, but we're going to put in number 3. There's number 3. That caught. Bring the scroll around and put in number 2. That caught. So now the chuck is actually crooked on purpose. It's going to hold the glass, believe me, completely crooked. So we're going to do the same thing over here. And we're going to find, again, number, where are you? Here's number 1. There's number 2. There's number 3. So number 3 should come out first. There's number 3. Number 2 should be next. There's number 2. Number 1 is still in. So we're going to take number 3, put it in number 2, beginning of the scroll. There's the beginning of the scroll. Now, guaranteed, these chucks are crooked, but we don't care because we're going to straighten the glass. The glass is what's important. Nice to have a nice straight lathe, nice to have nice straight chucks, but for this demonstration, I'm going to make them crooked on purpose. So, I'm going to take, well, I think this is about 30 millimeter or so. Maybe take about that much. And same over here. Because I can't use my outboard chuck because the outboard chuck is straight. I can't chuck that up, so we're going to have to go a little shorter. And cork would be nice. And I think I need a little packing on this side. And I'm going to put this end in the middle of basically where one would work. Lathe beds have a tendency to wear in the middle. If you come up real close, they might straighten up. If you go out far, they also might straighten up. I think I need this much packing here. And I'm going to need an extension on my blow hose. So I have to do that. And maybe we could just use this. Load this in here. Pull it out. Snug these things up. Good enough. Don't crush your glass. And I'm going to have to snap this off. So I can put my blow hose on. And usually hang that on there, but a rubber band is actually nice. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go get a rubber band. I'll be right back. Space normal speed. We're not going to speed through anything. Sometimes these hang better on rubber bands, I think. Okay, so we're pretty firm there, but they're going to be crooked. They're supposed to be. We don't care. Here we go. Really crooked. And not in a good way, but we're going to straighten them out right now. By the way, this is borosilicate. That looks pretty good. You gotta remember too that your glass is normally crooked. I've never really seen a straight piece of glass right out of the box. You normally have to straighten them. So there it is. They're running fairly straight. They're crooked in the chuck, but we don't care. What we've done is we've made sure that this part of the glass is running with the center line of the headstock, and this part is running with the center line of the tailstock. That's what's important. Now we're going to bring them together, and maybe Jay can come a little closer, and we're going to see how do they look? How do they line up? It looks so far, my tailstock is down a little bit. From the top, the glass seems to be lining up. The real test though now is I'm going to splice them together and I'm going to let it solidify. And if it solidifies without moving, the lathe is pretty straight. I have a feeling this is going to move a little bit. So here we go. Let's let that harden up and see what it does. Well, that's pretty good. That didn't move. If you have a crooked lathe, what will normally happen is it'll dog leg and it'll actually start to look like this a little bit over here or over here. So my lathe is fairly straight and I can do some fairly straight work on it. But again, get to know your machine, know what you can do with it, know what you can't do with it. So let's look at what you may be able to do with a little lathe to help straighten it out. Why don't we have Jay come around here. Again, you can talk to Tim O'Brien over at Litton, and he will guide you through some of this. On your tailstock, on the other side and on this side, there's 4 bolts under here. Those, I believe they're called the Gibbs. You can tighten those up. There's a process to do that. I think it's snug, and then an 1/8 inch out on these 4. That pulls the tailstock this way. You can adjust those. I believe, again, it's snug it and an 1/8 of a turn or so. It depends a little bit on your lathe too. If you're all worn in the middle of your bed and you tighten these and you try to go to the end, it may not go to the end because the end of your bed is not worn that much. That's a possibility. But you can, there's a few things you can do. On a Litton, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do to adjust the tailstock, especially if your bed is really worn. You can try to shim it, because on a Litton, and maybe most lathes, you have the stock or the chuck on, and the stock is front heavy. So it wears a little more in here through the years. You can try to shim it so that you can pick it up, and that can help. But unfortunately, there isn't a lot you can do. You can test it, and perhaps on the next video, we might get into that, what we can do to combat crookedness, what techniques are there to make sure that your work stays straight. May do that on the next video, or we may actually, possibly, get into some molding on a lathe. Might do that too. But I hope you like this. Hope it was helpful. You can do this with things that you have in your shop to test your lathe, to see what's going on. Anyway, thank you very much. Hope it was enjoyable. See you later.